Couple of minutes then, yeah.
I realise it sounds a bit pretentious, but Peter is someone who both searches for and seeks to tell the truth. That's the last line of Lord of the Flies by William Goldman. I really enjoyed my time at Oxford studying politics and economics, and while I was there I think the downside was I developed a reading addiction, but I did enjoy going to the Union to watch people debating. I remember Boris Johnson coming up to me at the end of one debate and shaking my hand. I think he was looking for my vote, and he said, "We were rather speaking in tandem tonight, I feel." And that was probably the last time I was on the same page as Boris Johnson politically. So the first time I stood for Parliament, I stood as an independent anti-cloning candidate. And I did that because the Labour government at the time were misleading the public. They were claiming to be the first country in the world, first government to ban human cloning. In fact, they were legalising therapeutic, as they called it, embryonic cloning. And they were merely pretending to ban something that couldn't be made at that point in time. And my by-election in Preston was designed to bring media attention to that duplicitous behaviour. So on the back of my by-election in Preston, I was expelled from the Labour Party for contesting an election against one of their candidates. I suppose I was a bit irritated at that point, and I thought to myself, well, if Tony Blair can damage the left as a cuckoo from the right in the nest of the left, why can't I from the left be a similar cuckoo in the nest of the right? So I joined the Conservative Party and I became a parliamentary candidate for them. I was primarily an expert advisor on bioethics and biotechnology, but I morphed into more of a speechwriter. I had a bit of an impact in the Commons and a bit of an impact in the Lords. In the Lords, I was supporting Lord Alton of Liverpool, and I was helping him understand the issues around cloning and genetic engineering. And in the Commons, I was sometimes helping David Willits, who was Minister for Higher Education, helping him craft and polish some speeches. I was quite tickled by the fact his nickname was Two Brains, and in a conceited fashion, I like to think I was sometimes the other brain. And I think my imprint, what I left behind, well, some sound bites. I remember the government was arguing that cloning was therapeutic, and my rebuttal to that was no, it's technological cannibalism. And that caused a furious response from Yvette Cooper, who was the minister in charge at the time. Strange things can happen when you're in the foothills of politics. I was in California. I was actually giving a lecture in Seattle, and somebody said, if you come to San Diego tomorrow, that's quite the journey. You can meet with a guy called Tom, who's a film producer. So I went to meet Tom, and he said, oh, it's good that you've come. We don't know anyone in England. And Mel Gibson wants to raise some prints and advertising money for this film, The Passion of the Christ. And apparently you know quite a lot of Christian wannabe do-gooder philanthropic multimillionaires. So I ended up helping Mel Gibson to organise. I actually went to Wardour Street and did a private screening, and I did the talk before the screening and Mel did the Q&A. And then I actually flew the film. Bruce Davey from Icon allowed me to have the film a year early, and I flew it to the Mears residence in Dublin, and I showed it to some friends of a multi-millionaire entrepreneur called Garrett. And in response to that, he was very, very supportive in my political funding over the next few years. I wouldn't say I made a big impact in politics using that money and other money. More of a splash, more of a belly flop, really. So I stood for the Conservatives. I kind of feel a bit ashamed, but it was 2005 general election. Michael Howard was in charge, and I was the candidate for Liverpool West Derby. My agent was a guy called Jake Berry, who later became, I think, Minister for the North, and maybe he was even a cabinet minister. But at the time, he was inept. He didn't even know how to file the documents to put the candidates onto the ballot properly. I made a big mistake. I felt really sorry for Ian Duncan Smith because he'd been knifed in the back and his election was stolen from him and fought by Michael Howard. So I invited him up to Liverpool and organised a day for him, visiting places like Zoe's place and going on local radio, talk about controversial issues like red light districts. And I got 2 reprimanding phone calls. I think one was from the head of candidates and one was from a deputy chairman of the party. And I was told that I'd behaved disgracefully. And the following week I was invited on a TV show and I was told by headquarters to turn it down, but I didn't. And just after the election, they invited me down to London and Chris Grayling took great pleasure in saying, "We're throwing you off the candidates list, goodbye." So Carl Jung gave me some perspective here. When you go to Carl Jung and you say, "We've been promoted," he will always say, "Oh, sit down, we'll get through this together." When you say to Carl Jung, "We've been fired," he'll always say, "Let's throw a party." So my expulsion from the footlights of British politics was bittersweet. New beginnings, an opportunity to go and live in France. And I'm very much a fan of Homo Ludens, man, the game player. So I used to play poker in the casino in France. I was reading many chess books, trying to understand strategy at a deeper, better level, puzzling over why I'd been so bad, so inept at politics. I had a reading addiction, and eventually I went to Canada to try to get past that, and I had a fortune to work with a brilliant guy called Gabor Mate, and we were on a course on a Canadian island. I think there were 40 people giving up heroin and 40 people giving up alcohol. I was giving up reading, and Gabor was giving up classical music. He said he knew he was a classical music addict when his wife was having twins, and over the Sky Bridge he saw HMV, and he thought, "I'll just run over there and buy a couple of records." And when he got back, his wife was holding the twins. Testimony to his work, I didn't read a book for 6 weeks. I'd gone decades ordering 2 books a day on Amazon and finishing them both before going to sleep. So not reading a book for 6 weeks was tremendous, a breath of fresh air. If I summed up my life, I'd say I should have read less and danced more. So having been expelled from the Labour Party and kicked off the Conservative Party candidates list, I started to think maybe I'm not a joiner. Maybe I don't do well in organisations. And then the hat trick, the BBC banned me. It was quite an interesting story because I was travelling down to do a debate with Christopher Reeve, Superman. He was arguing in favour of embryonic stem cells and I was arguing that it was an illegitimate use. And I got a call from the producer who knew I'd already got 3/4 of the way to the studio. He said, "I'm terribly sorry, Peter, and I don't quite know how to tell you this, but we can't have you on the programme." And I said, "Oh, well, that's a bit of a blow. Can you tell me why?" And he said, "No." But later that week, a friend of mine who worked for the BBC World Service, I think I'll leave his name out for now, he said, "Congratulations, there's a memo come across my desk. Because you've upset Lord Winston on the Today programme, and because you've done nothing but slag Tony Blair off over the cloning issue, the BBC have put a memo out to say you're not to be invited onto any programmes at all. Well done, Peter." I think for many years I was more comfortable inside games and books than around people. I think people were incalculably deep. What's that phrase? Depth sounding unto depth. I wasn't really ready for that. I'd had quite a traumatic childhood. My dad was away at sea. My mum was drinking a lot. And I dived into reading as a narcotic, as a way to not deal with emotions. So later, my grade playing level in poker or in chess was a lot higher than my playing level in politics, because politics contains people and they're too complex for me to analyse. It also contains dark, dark, dark forces, and I couldn't navigate past those forces. They're overwhelming. So I played poker semi-professionally for 18 months, claim to fame, finished 16th in the British and 10th in the Spanish Championship. And then I became more interested in numerology. Cards, yes, but cartomancy. And I realized that I needed to spend more time in my non-logical mind to balance all these A-level syllabuses I was absorbing. And I started to offer my services as a tarot reader. And I really fell in love with the architecture of the archetypes. I really fell in love with the gematria of the numerology. And the layouts, linear or non-linear, can take people to a profoundly deeper weave than the day-to-day life of the BBC as they deceive. I do regret that my education weaponized my use of language, and I wasn't disciplined or intelligent enough to disambiguate contexts. So about 2 years ago, I was playing in a mixed doubles match. Well, it was a doubles match. One of my sons was helping me on one side of the tennis net, and two of my sons were on the other side. And the two on the other side were much more skilled than we were. But I knew I could disrupt them psychologically by using invective and aggression, verbal aggression. And we managed to win the tennis match, but I reduced my own children to a pile of blubber. And I thought, wow, that's what my education was designed to make me do. It was designed to make me look at any target and destroy it. That can't be the future. It can't be the future of Oxford. It can't be the future of the West. Conflict is not the way. Love's the way. I think I took life very seriously. You know, as a teenager, my mum wanted me to go to Oxford to study politics, maybe because her dad had been a member of parliament. And I was really prepared to go to great lengths to make that happen. And then later, I was always trying to use my logical mind and control of words to make things happen, to bulldoze people out of the way. And it's only really in my 50s that I've realised nothing's good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And I've tried to dive deep into reframing, and I've tried to understand if we can control our interior response to external events, we'll realise, as Kipling did, that these are just imposters. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these two imposters just the same, then the world and everything that's in it will be yours. And that's where we need to go now, inside, to be gentle with one another. I'm a great fan of Rudolf Steiner. I think I've listened to more than 2,000 of his lectures on steiner.com. And he, 100 years ago, saw that the world didn't really have a spiritual dimension. Not intellectually speaking, it will always have a spiritual dimension. But Rudolf Steiner argued that there will come a time when the STEM methodologies will turn to face the spiritual realities. I think we're just entering that age now. Non-local action in physics reminds us of Sufi poetry. And the STEM facade is crumbling as we seek true understanding of who and what we are. And I think we need to revivify people like Rudolf Steiner and Albert Schweitzer. There are many treasures buried in the depths of the past. And we have to work hard to bring them out and show them to the new generation. I think the game of my life, in a way, has been chess. You know, it was gifted to me by a primary school teacher, Mrs. Thornton, long gone now, sadly. But I'm very grateful to her regularly, you know, for the gift of chess, because as a player and a spectator of world-class events, it's just been a constant source of joy. I remember Lenin said of chess, it's a cold shower for the mind. And Teresa of Avila said it's a window on the soul. And I think at different times in my life, it's been both of those and more. I was really pleased to win a tournament in Barrow-in-Furness Town Hall on Sunday last week. It was a gentling process because after some bumps recently in my business life, it was just great to be able to finish last week on a very high note borne aloft by chess once more. Until recently, my main line of entrepreneurial work was helping students get offers to read subjects at Oxford and Cambridge. And over the last 8 years, I've helped 106 students to get offers. Only about 70 of those ended up at Oxford or Cambridge because the A-level bar has been mercilessly high. And then about 3 weeks ago, I lost a lot of jobs and contracts for various reasons. But I could hear Carl Jung again saying, congratulations, new spaces are opening up. And I thought, I'm going to take the plunge. I believe esoterics is the future. I believe what Steiner said, that we must turn and look with all our creative intellectual capacity. Einstein himself, he said, the human mind contains the intellect and the imagination. The intellect is a servant, or should be. The imagination is the master. Sadly, we've built an educational system that worships the servant and ignores the master. The late 21st century won't be like that. Imagineering will be key. Meditation will be key. Traveling to the depths will be key. And we will finally rise. Just have to navigate our way past all the nonsense in the Middle East and the rest of the world by looking deeper at who we really are. Is it 7:05?